Hello and welcome to the Friday afternoon chill out lounge with the UBE Academy. Oh, today we are going to cover quite some fascinating topics. Remember, we started some weeks ago with our tour around the world. We started with the US elections, we covered Brexit, we went to India. But there's another place that we really are fascinated by, a place that I had the privilege to travel quite extensively before COVID-19. Today, it's about China and it's about blockchain technology. So we are combining the best of both worlds, digital cutting edge technology with one of the most fascinating economic superpowers there is. So welcome, Gloria. How are you?
Hello, everyone. It's really a pleasure for me to be here and have this conversation with Oliver. Very much looking forward.
Thank you. And of course, given the fact that European business and Chinese business are really closely linked, we want to understand what's going on in your country at this very moment. You know, in Europe, we are struggling with the second wave of COVID-19. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Let's say business is more optimistic than it was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. So, how's business in China keeping up at this stage during this worldwide pandemic? Can you share some insights with us?
Yeah, for sure. So the pandemic actually really broke out in China in the very beginning of February. I had a very interesting personal experience with it because in the beginning of February, I actually traveled to Brussels for a conference. And because the pandemic broke out back home, so I was kind of stuck in Europe for a couple of weeks. And I went back around the beginning of March and returned to Shanghai and quarantined myself at home for 2 weeks and then basically went back to work. So the pandemic hit China pretty badly in the entirety of February. And I remember at that time, basically everyone is working from home. Most of the cities are not really communicating with each other in terms of like transportations. A lot of people are extending their stay after the Chinese New Year holidays, which was basically the beginning of February. And then the schools were also delaying the opening of the new semester, and the students were at home. But I would say that the situation was more or less controlled in the middle of March. So, for example, in Shanghai, we've seen that a lot of these restaurants and services basically starting to open up during March, and actually a lot of companies started to resume the work in the office already by the end of March. So since March, so April, May, June, and until now, we had scattered cases happening, but it's not so much of a public scare anymore. So people are still going to work every day and going to restaurants. I would say that more or less the situations are contained. So we had a very bad economic hit during February until April. A lot of offline companies were facing austerity of no clients, very few business coming in, but now a lot of things are actually resuming.
And how is it? Thank you for this. And how is it doing business with the rest of the world? I mean, let's see. What you're saying is that the situation in China is probably not back to normal, but it is, let's say, manageable. That's what I hear. It's quite the contrary in other parts of the of this planet. So has this impacted you? And we will talk about your company, Ontology, in a few moments. But just has it impacted you in the way you do business outside of China?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the COVID situation is very unfortunate that it's already becoming a global pandemic and really hits the economy very badly. So China has taken a very drastic measure. Basically, it's not really allowing so many international flights. So a lot of this business communication are still pending. So this definitely somehow it's not really much helping the business are having international communication needs or international traveling needs. So we are also anxiously looking to see when the flights will be resumed and the borders will be open. So we can go on important international business traveling for sure. And there's definitely also impacts on the economy side, even though life is sort of like resumed to norm. But since 2016, there has been a supply side modification inside of China because in the previous decade, the economy experienced very rapid growth. There's a lot of building of, for example, electricity facilities, concrete facilities, glass facilities, all these infrastructure related industry supplies. But then the economy started to hit a more like a gradual development phase because urbanization is already achieved a certain sort of like stable development phase. And the country was also controlling for more land to be used for commercial purposes or building too many houses that are just not really having much of a demand. So, but what happens to all these factories and industries, right? So, a lot of industries actually sort of like shrinking in terms of its production capability because the demand side is simply not there. And this entire COVID situation is definitely accelerating that. In a lot of specific segments of the economy, a lot of companies are actually shutting down, especially the smaller ones. They are leaving the competition. So this is accelerating the consolidation of these economic sectors. We're expecting the remaining companies will having a better financial performance, but this is definitely also having some impact in terms of more monopoly power in the specific segments. And certain industries were really hit very badly. For example, offline education and training industry, right? So this was heavily depending on the training centers or learning centers in malls or in some shopping centers. But because of the COVID situation, the parents are really not sending their kids anymore there. So in return, there was a booming of the internet based learning and education industry, but the offline ones were really going bankrupt. And we're seeing this is going to be an effect felt by the banking industry. So they probably will be facing more bad debts and some slower paying loans from the companies. But the stock market, for example, it's actually doing pretty well this year. And experts were saying this is mostly due to the more stimulating financial policies. So it's not necessarily entirely a sign of the recovery of the economy.
It's interesting. You could guys out there listening. This is an economist talking to an economist. This is wonderful. Ah, now, so it's interesting what we see in Europe is that similar effects like um, the offline training is dead. Universities are still in lockdown, so everything switched to online. Schools are open in Europe, and probably they're open in China as well. But of course, with let's say enhanced duty of care and precautionary measures. But what we see here in Europe is that suddenly, digital COVID-19 was, and let's say it was an not requested and not really wanted, but it was a mega booster for digitalization. So what we
Yes.
see here in Europe is suddenly things that were unthinkable, for example, home offices, uh, having your employees out off your daily control mechanism, working from home, uh, people not seeing customers in real person, but suddenly do this online. So there was a massive boost for digitalization in Europe. Question is, probably similar to what you have just said, is probably a similar situation in China. Are there new opportunities and risks now for our European and Chinese business affairs? Is this something, what is the best we can make out of this really unfortunate situation, the pandemic? How can we get the best out of it?
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic. I actually had the pleasure to work and lived in Europe for around like 6 years prior to returning to work in China. So we had this discussion with some colleagues and friends about why there's actually a more of a internet online to offline service economy in China was actually developing faster than that was developing in Europe. And one of the reasons that we have analyzed is the population density, right? Because when you have these population density in the Chinese cities, you could actually have a lot of cost-effective ways of delivering services offline, online to offline. For example, like in 2020, their average Chinese sent around 60 pieces of parcels from ordering services from online to be shipped to their door, right? And one of the interesting norm, which is also even more accelerated by the COVID, is the amount of takeouts people order online. So there are around like 7 million delivery guys in the entirety of China, basically just delivering foods,
Wow.
groceries, whatever to your door. And this number is still growing every year around like I think previous years even more, maybe like 20, 30%, and last year was like 10%. And this we have a man-made holiday in China. It's called the Double 11. It's November 11th. It's the online e-commerce holiday. So most of the shops will be offering a huge discount to the consumers on that day. So that's the shopping festival. And this year, they even hit like a record high of the e-commerce sales. So from this point of view, I think this is also kind of an opportunity. I can see that Europe will be becoming more internet service centric and having more online to offline services. And I think this is definitely good for international trade and for having more digitalized collaborations between different countries. So yeah, I think this is
That's in,
maybe the silver lining of the cloud.
Just one thing the first I saw this the first time a couple of years ago when I was in China, which then a new industry emerged, and these were rental bikes, similar to Uber. So basically platform-based rental services, and the bike business was amazing. My first rental floating fleet bike I rode with in Beijing. And then they came over to Europe, and now in Europe at least, and this is, let's say, digitalization, and well, COVID-19 is a curse and a blessing for digitalization. It has been a curse for these companies because Mobike went out of business. Two or three others have filed for insolvency, are under Chapter 11 like arrangements. What is it? What's the situation for these companies in China? Because I believe, and you said that mobility has dramatically gone down.
Yeah. Well, the interesting fact is that this type of companies, in particular, this bike ranking companies, were already facing a difficult situation before the COVID, because the unit economy is actually very difficult to achieve in this type of platform economy. So one of the biggest ones were actually basically ceased operating, and the other one sold itself to another internet giant for offline to online to offline
Mhm.
services. So there was some integration of such synergies, but by itself, that business model is really questionable. And I think
Yeah.
this is something really dynamic and interesting about the Chinese economy. A lot of people do not really understand. Such a big market and has a lot of capital investment, a lot of users, and the Chinese users are very forgettable. What I mean is that you could give them like a product which is not perfect, and they will not, remember you for this bad performance after 1 year if you can offer something really good. So it leaves a lot of space for companies to make mistakes, and they do, right? So each time when like a massive amount of investments rush into industry, for example, the internet industry, there's a lot of startups coming out, and many of them actually have their days, but they really do not have a valid business model after a couple of years. So they probably will go being consolidated to other companies, or they just go disappear into the night, right? But because of this type of waves of creating companies and making them fail, it's happening really, really fast. So some good companies do survive. You could really argue, I have this personal opinion that the efficiency of making these companies might not be very high. We do waste some money eventually, but it's a big country, so it actually has this type of dynamics there.
Right. Now that's interesting. It's also interesting to hear from your end that there were already a lot of, let's say, criticism or let's say skeptical voices discussing some elements of the platform economics. For example, bike bike rental, which I never understood why the valuations were so staggeringly high. Okay, so if we think about this, what is then? Let's assume in a couple of months or year, maybe at the end of 2021, the pandemic will probably not be over, but let's say it will be contained to such an effect that normal life can continue. Let's just have this thought experiment. What would be the new normal in China? So, what's the new situation? Do you really believe, like some people in Europe do, after this pandemic is over, it will be all like 2019? Or do you see there is a structural change happening in China that will not be reversed? And what would that be?
Mm, I think the external environment for China is going to experience a new norm, and that's a more interesting and more striking environment that we're operating in. Because, as you know, like we are facing a lot of deglobalization trends around the world. Even though China is actually a very export-dependent country, but given the certain trends, political and economical trends in the world, it's definitely have to think about ways to rely more on domestic consumption and investment for its economic engine to continue to grow. So I think that is a very important aspect to take consideration. But given the fact that China benefited a lot from globalization and trade, and it's very important factory for the world for a couple of structural reasons, right? Because it's a very stable and has a lot of skilled workers, and they are also very diligent in terms of working products. So many industries, for example, especially automotive industries and some electronic manufacturing industries, see this huge opportunity to capitalize on such human capital assets to increase their profit level, right? So I would say that China will still become the factory for the world, but it will have to really think about how to better communicate with the outside world and to collaborate with it. And Belt and Road Initiative, I don't know if the audiences are familiar with that, is one of the initiatives proposed by China a couple of years ago, trying to help to invest to build these infrastructures along the Silk Road countries from Eastern Europe, Eastern Asia, and to Africa, and try to do more trade with the countries there. So it's still very important the outside world has on the Chinese society and Chinese economy. And I would say that being more transparent and being more um, uh, transparent in terms of the economic and the political sector is something that is the historical trend in China, because you really want to continue your economic development. You will have to rely on having a good collaboration with countries around the world.
Okay. Talking about transparency, what a nice cue for me, because one thing we want to cover besides COVID-19 and how things are going on in your part of the world is transparency and how digitalization can and foster and can increase transparency in business transaction. Brings me to blockchain, right? We were introduced our listeners and our audience. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and both of you, Gloria and her, are active in the blockchain industry. I'm not going to play this old man story. Oh, I have no idea what blockchain is. Please explain. No, of course we all know what blockchain is, and it is a fascinating piece of technology. However, what I would like to discuss now, let's really go to the bit more into the details, is can blockchain technology help us with our digital transformation, especially now in the in times of COVID-19 and the pandemic?
Yes, I'm happy, really happy to discuss this topic with audiences and with you here. I had I had an opportunity to speak at a European forum earlier this year about blockchain. And I believe it's actually not a technology to help transform the digitalization for our current economy. It's actually a choice for us to make. Why do I say so? So to understand this, we have to first understand how the current world economy has transformed itself into a data-driven economy. For example, a lot of Chinese companies are maybe they were doing e-commerce, right? Maybe they were doing news, maybe they were doing social media. They were all able to do financial services nowadays. Why so? It was like unbelievable, like a decades ago, right? So how could you imagine some company just completely doing something in a very different sector? But now it's so normal because they have massive users. These users subscribe to their content online. They use your social media. They create a lot of behavior data about their daily economic and social life. And they will be able to use such data to have a much better understanding about these people's credit capabilities. So these data were used for risk control models to loan money to these users, right? So why they were able to do that is just because they have the data. And we're actually seeing that also from companies such as Google and Facebook. For example, like Facebook was able to provide a lot of much more targeted and much more accurately designed services to its users, because it basically have a lot of travel companies in a particular segment, and they can consolidate all these data from these relevant travel companies. So they have this unprecedented advantage to provide services, and this will only enlarge their monopoly position in the economy. And we're seeing that also in China for sure. So we are facing a future that is going to be data-driven anyways. It's not going to be reversed. And do we want that data to be controlled and to be stored in some company's centralized server, or we want them to be somehow stored, controlled, and managed in a way that we all can see it transparently, safely, and accountably managed? And we as users ourselves even have the power to control our own data. So this is the very essence of why blockchain is necessary. And this is also very prominent when we talk about when people want to do contact tracing for potential COVID patients, right? And if you do it in a really efficient way, that will be really getting a lot of data of yours and comparing with other data with others, and then provide you targeted suggestion if you should stay at home or not, if you have been in the risk of infection or not. But you also wanted to make sure that these data are managed in a decentralized way with a open and transparent governance, so you don't risk any privacy risks. So I would say we use blockchain or not as a choice, but I would advocate that we do this in a privacy protected way. And it's also very important for global collaboration of business. Imagine if a Chinese company is providing service to a German user, or a German company providing service to a Chinese user, right? So you will need their data to customize that service for them. But how do you make sure that this is done in a way that both parties can trust each other? Then you need a common ground, which is basically the technology of blockchain.
Yeah,
So,
this is
yeah.
yeah, that's interesting, because one of the things that we learned, that data-driven models create natural monopolies, and this is simply owed to the fact because you have the demand and supply side economies of scale, and of course, blockchain technology can at least, let's say, distribute the economies of scale in a different manner. So, what that brings us to the question, at the beginning, I said, yeah, we need to talk about your company, because I remember this is exactly what you're doing. So, maybe a few words about ontology, because having a cutting edge blockchain company on our show, that's great for us. So tell us.
Thank you, Oliver. Yeah, absolutely. So ontology is a public blockchain. So we have our headquarters in Singapore, and the majority of our operations and technical teams are actually also in China. And we have a office in Germany as well, because we want to become the open source blockchain infrastructure for bridging businesses and bridging data, bridging collaboration between different countries. Ontology as a public blockchain is very much specialized in the digital technology of identity and data management. We have the infrastructure, but we also have certain layers on top of that to provide safe, transparent, and privacy protected data exchange for collaboration for business, and also for users to manage their data and identity credentials in a very safe way. So yeah, I would say that it's one of the most exciting collaboration between Asia and Europe, and I see blockchain play a very important role in Europe. That's also the reason why we have a lot of business partners from Germany and the rest of Europe, because Europe has a lot of users, and mostly they're using American internet technology or services. So and Europe has a very long tradition of valuing personal autonomy, personal control, and privacy protection. So I think that is a perfect place to have this entire movement to start for European users and European citizens.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so of course, my God, the time flies. We've already discussed half an hour about these fascinating topics, blockchain and China, and of course, as every guest, you will have the same opportunity to tell us whatever you like or want in 60 seconds. So we have our little section, 60 seconds with Gloria. Gloria, I will not interrupt you, so please tell us.
I just want to say that given my very special position, because I am heading the ecosystem development and partnerships for ontology with its global business partners, and I had the opportunity to personally stay in Europe. for a couple of years working and living there and made many good friends. So I see China and Europe has a lot of potential in terms of collaborating with each other. And I think there's a lot of misunderstandings that's basically due to the fact that Chinese hasn't been really great communicating itself. And it has this a little bit of a pride of, kind of like trying to say good things about itself, right? But I think there's a lot of things that are very interesting happening in China that's also very much relevant for the world. And if we actually have more communication and understanding with each other, that brings not only the business opportunities, but also that's also a very important force for the world to come together in this very fragmenting moment of the world.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was Gloria Wu of Ontology from Shanghai, broadcasting via the UBE Academy Friday Chill Out Lounge. Thank you so much for making this possible. I know you have quite an tight and busy schedule, even on a Friday afternoon. So, thank you so much. Hope to hearing from you more about Ontology. Check out their website, and guys, stay safe, stay healthy. This was the UBE Academy Friday Chill Out. Thank you so much. Take care and bye bye.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.